Hello everyone, welcome to back my channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before starting the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Eric Bischoff was one of the most influential figures in the wrestling industry when WCW and WWE battled for television ratings supremacy in the 1990s. The 69-year-old recently discussed his early days as a wrestling fan. Before breaking into the business, Bischoff worked for the American Wrestling Association, AWA, between 1986 and 1991 as a sales team member and on-a-screen personality. In the 1990s, he made his name as a WCW executive when the company's flagship show Nitro regularly drew more viewers than WWE Raw on the Wrestling Time Machine. Bischoff recalled watching Bobo Brazil, Bruno Sammartino, and Vern Gagne as a young fan. While many wrestlers and behind-the-scenes personnel dream of working in the business, Eric Bischoff initially had no plans to become a wrestling executive. Watch the video above to hear Bischoff's take on what the future might hold for Cody Rhodes and The Rock following their interaction on Raw. Host Mac Davis and WWE Hall of Famer Teddy Long also gave their thoughts on fans' reaction to The Rock's seemingly turning babyface. An unexpected meeting with Vern Gagne resulted in Eric Bischoff leaving his sales manager job to join the AWA. Bischoff added that a job offer quickly materialized after he met with Gagne and former AWA director and producer Mike Shields. Bischoff agreed to work on the AWA's syndicated shows despite having no idea what the role entailed. The WWE Hall of Famer also became an interviewer for the promotion. What is your favorite Eric Bischoff moment? Hit the discuss button and let us know. It was the late 1980s, and professional wrestling was in the midst of a revolution. The industry was dominated by the charismatic Vince McMahon and the WWF, whose national expansion had made the likes of Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior household names. But in the background, a young and ambitious man named Eric Bischoff was about to begin a journey that would eventually transform the wrestling world and reshape the very landscape of professional wrestling itself. In this exclusive recount, Bischoff looks back on the serendipitous series of events that brought him into the business and laid the foundation for what would become a legendary career in the wrestling industry. The beginning, from small town to big dreams. Eric Bischoff was born on November 27, 1955, in Detroit, Michigan. Growing up in the Detroit suburb of Pontiac, Bischoff was no stranger to the world of sports. He was a passionate fan of football and basketball, and like many other young boys, he had dreams of becoming an athlete himself. However, he soon found that his talents lay in other areas. Though he had an interest in sports, Bischoff was more fascinated by the entertainment and spectacle behind them. In his early years, Bischoff was more interested in what went on behind the scenes than in playing on the field himself. He eventually enrolled at the University of Minnesota, where he majored in communications and developed an interest in television production. His college years gave him a deeper understanding of how media and sports could be combined to create something special. He found himself gravitating toward the world of broadcasting, aiming to be involved in the entertainment side of things, rather than the sports side. I never set out to get into wrestling, Bischoff would later recall in interviews. It was more of a series of fortunate accidents than a dream I had, but looking back now, I realized that every step I took in my early years led me exactly to where I ended up. The first brush with wrestling, a chance encounter. Bischoff's first real exposure to the wrestling world came when he was working in Minneapolis for a local television station. It was here that he would meet a key figure who would change his life forever, Vern Gagne, the legendary wrestler and promoter behind the American Wrestling Association, AWA. Gagne was a well-known figure in the world of professional wrestling in the 1970s and 1980s, but by the late 1980s, the AWA was starting to lose ground to McMahon's WWF, which was taking the national spotlight. Gagne had a vision of expanding the AWA's reach and improving its TV product, and he saw Bischoff as a potential asset at the time. Bischoff was working as a sales manager at a local television station. One day, he was tasked with helping Gagne promote a wrestling event. It was a small-scale operation compared to the flashy, nationwide appeal of the WWF, but Bischoff was intrigued. There was something about the spectacle of wrestling, the larger-than-life characters, and the passionate fan base that caught his attention. "I'd always been interested in television and entertainment," Bischoff recalls. "But when I met Vern Gagne, it was like a light bulb went off. I saw how he was trying to combine the local TV market with wrestling, and it struck me that there was real potential in making wrestling more than just a regional sport. It wasn't just about the matches, it was about creating an experience for fans." This would mark the beginning of Bischoff's journey into the wrestling business. But it wasn't as simple as a direct path into a promotion. Bischoff was still working his regular job in television, but the spark had been lit. As fate would have it, Gagne's AWA was beginning to struggle in the late 1980s, and the promotion was looking for ways to revamp its product to compete with the WWF. They needed someone who could think outside the box and bring new ideas to the table. And so Eric Bischoff would find himself in the right place at the right time. A leap of faith, joining the AWA. In 1987, Bischoff made the leap from local television into the world of professional wrestling when he accepted a position with the AWA as their director of TV production. He had no prior experience working directly in the wrestling business, but his background in television and communications was exactly what the promotion needed. His goal was simple: to modernize the AWA's TV broadcasts and make the product feel more professional and appealing to a wider audience. "I had no idea what I was doing at first," Bischoff admits, "but I did know television, and I knew that wrestling needed a facelift. It needed to feel bigger, more exciting, and more polished. The AWA had a great tradition, but it was behind the times." At first, Bischoff worked to improve the production quality of the AWA's television shows, giving them a more professional look. He introduced new graphics, better lighting, and enhanced production values, all of which helped make the AWA seem more in tune with the times. But this was just the beginning of what would eventually lead to his rise to prominence in the wrestling world. Despite Bischoff's efforts, the AWA continued to lose ground to the WWF. Vince McMahon had already taken the wrestling world by storm with his larger-than-life approach to television production and his aggressive national expansion strategy. The AWA, by contrast, felt stale, and its reliance on traditional wrestling formats was no longer enough to compete with McMahon's high-energy, glitzy shows. The road to WCW, from AWA to Turner Broadcasting. It was during his time with the AWA that Bischoff caught the attention of another key figure in the wrestling world, Ted Turner, the billionaire media mogul behind Turner Broadcasting. Turner had made a name for himself with CNN and TBS, and in the early 1980s, he had purchased the rights to a struggling wrestling promotion called Jim Crockett Promotions, a JCP. Under Turner's ownership, JCP would become known as World Championship Wrestling, WCW. However, the promotion was still struggling to compete with the WWF's dominance. At the time, WCW was led by Jim Herd, who was focused on continuing the legacy of JCP, but had little understanding of how to modernize the product. In 1989, Bischoff was recruited by WCW to join the company as their vice president of television production. His role was to oversee the production of WCW's weekly shows, and once again Bischoff would apply the lessons he had learned at the AWA, improving the look and feel of the broadcasts, bringing in new ideas, and trying to build something that could eventually challenge McMahon's WWF. But Bischoff's role at WCW would soon evolve beyond just production. In 1991, when Jim Herd was fired as WCW's executive vice president, Bischoff was thrust into a new role, president of WCW. The Monday Night Wars, rising to prominence. Eric Bischoff's true impact on the wrestling world began when he took over as president of WCW in 1991. At the time, WCW was a distant second to the WWF, and its ratings were languishing in comparison. Bischoff knew something had to change if WCW was ever going to stand a chance against McMahon's juggernaut. Under Bischoff's leadership, WCW took a bold, new direction. In 1995, WCW signed a young, up-and-coming wrestler named Hulk Hogan, who was already a household name due to his success in the WWF. Bischoff saw Hogan as a key asset to WCW, believing that his star power would give the promotion the legitimacy it needed. But it wasn't just about signing big names. Bischoff also recognized the importance of creating a more compelling television product. WCW launched its flagship show, Monday Nitro, in 1995, airing head-to-head with WWF's flagship show, Monday Night Raw. Bischoff knew that in order to compete with the WWF, WCW needed to offer something unique. He introduced the concept of the New World Order, NWO, a faction led by Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall that would shake the wrestling world to its core. The NWO was a game-changer. It introduced a more realistic, edgy storyline that blurred the lines between reality and fiction, and it quickly became one of the most talked-about angles in wrestling history. The result? WCW's ratings skyrocketed, and for the first time in years, WCW was able to outdraw the WWF in the Monday Night Wars, a rivalry that would define the industry for much of the late 1990s. Reflections on a legacy. Looking back on his career, Eric Bischoff acknowledges that his journey into the wrestling business was full of twists and turns. From his early days working in television, to his time in the AWA, to his rise to power in WCW, Bischoff's career was defined by an ability to adapt, innovate, and take risks. His influence on the wrestling industry cannot be overstated. "I never set out to change the business," Bischoff says with a laugh. "But I guess that's what happened. I just wanted to make the shows better, make them more exciting, and reach a wider audience, and in doing so I ended up helping to create an era of wrestling that people still talk about today." Eric Bischoff's story is one of ambition, creativity, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. Through his leadership, WCW became a formidable force in the wrestling world, and his impact on the industry can still be felt today. Whether it was his work with the NWO, his innovative approaches to television production, or his ability to think outside the box, Bischoff's contributions to professional wrestling are undeniable. "I wasn't always the most popular guy in the room, but I always believed in what we were doing," Bischoff says. And in the end, that's what made all the difference. This exclusive recount of Eric Bischoff's journey into the wrestling business showcases his path from humble beginnings to becoming one of the most influential figures in the history of professional wrestling. His innovative ideas, his knack for entertainment, and his bold decisions helped shape the modern era of wrestling, and his legacy will continue to inspire future generations of fans and wrestlers alike. Thanks for watching this video, and please subscribe our WWE official YouTube channel for more update news.